It's Memorial Day, and we are remembering those people who made the ultimate sacrifice and gave their lives so that you and I could be free. Hi, I'm Johnny Kincaid, and I want to thank you for joining us for This Week in Evansville. Today is our Memorial Day edition. We'll get into more of that and some obviously patriotic kind of stuff during the course of the program today. But first, I want to just remind you to be sure to subscribe and like and share some comments. We love hearing your comments on the program here. So we're remembering Memorial Day. And the first thing I think that I want to do is just define the difference between Memorial Day and Veterans Day, because especially in recent years, we tend to have that a little bit confused, right? That on Veterans Day, we want to remember those who were fallen heroes. And on Memorial Day, we tend to want to recognize those who are still living veterans of service to our country. Memorial Day isn't about those surviving soldiers. It's about those who didn't make it back home. That's who we recognize on Memorial Day. It's a unique group of people who make the decision that they are going to willingly sacrifice their life, if that's what it takes, in order to protect you and I. That's a big deal. And we owe such a deep, deep debt of gratitude to those who served and made that sacrifice. I mean, who does that? Who makes that as their decision that they're going to lay their lives down for others? I mean, obviously, yes, we've got the men and women who have served in the military. They're certainly in that group that, and the people that we remember today that didn't make it back home. They did that as a sacrifice for us. And then, of course, we've got first responders, policemen, firemen, and others who didn't make it home at the end of their shift. They willingly and freely gave up their lives for our freedom. Oh yeah, and there's one other. That's Jesus Christ. He willingly sacrificed his life so that we might have eternal life, so that we would not have to go around constantly trying to atone for our sins, that they were taken care of by Jesus. And we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on the religious aspect here, but I want to make sure that we include that element. Because when we talk about these people in the military who sacrificed their lives, it was very much a Jesus-like move that they made in willingly giving their lives for us. Right? We need to teach that. See, we need to teach the meaning of Memorial Day. We need to teach the sacrifice. We need to talk to our kids about the huge number of men who stormed the beach at Normandy, risking their lives, in the huge number that were slaughtered on that beach. But they were doing what needed to be done in order to save not just the freedoms of our country, but to save the world. Our children need to understand that. Our young people need that message of sacrifice, of willingness to sacrifice. And that's what Memorial Day means. I'm not saying that we don't do the picnics and the cookouts and all of those fun things that start the summer season. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that in addition to those fun things that we're going to do, we should take a few moments to talk about this topic of sacrifice. Especially if you've had somebody in your family who sacrificed their life in service to our country. But even if no family member made that sacrifice, it's still a topic that bears discussion for sure. If this generation forgets that sacrifice, they start thinking of our freedoms as being something that's cheap, low cost, there hasn't been any real sacrifice to it because they haven't learned about the sacrifice that was involved. So it's up to you and I to make sure that they learn about that sacrifice while we're having fun, celebrating Memorial Day and the kickoff to summer. I know that's how we all view it instead of viewing it for what it is. People tend to say, well, it's the start of summer. It's the kickoff. Here we go. Time to let the good times roll. And certainly when I grew up in our family, that was the case. You know, Memorial Day was a day for a big family get together. You know, my parents and my grandparents remember when the day was called Decoration Day, and it was a day to go out and decorate the graves at the cemetery, and so it was on Memorial Day weekend. At some point in the weekend, we would, as a family, go out to the cemetery and lay flowers on the graves of some of our lost relatives. And we didn't really attach the military sacrifice that was made for us into that. We just decorated the graves of our loved ones, and then we went on about our weekend. On Memorial Day itself, the whole family, everybody, it was not just my mom and dad, my brother and my sister. It was grandma and grandpa and aunts and uncles and cousins and friends, and we'd all go to the lake. Spirit Lake. I grew up in the Northwest in Washington State, and kind of in the shadow of Mount St. Helens. And Spirit Lake was this beautiful lake right at the base of the mountain, and that's where we went for 3-day weekends in those days. And so we'd take the hour or hour and a half drive that seemed like it took forever and go up to the mountain, and we'd have this huge picnic out there with, you know, usually we were simple folks. It was bologna sandwiches and potato salad and potato chips and watermelon but it was just a great time for the family, and somebody would always bring a boat and try dragging people around the lake to try to get them up on water skis, and you'd watch people swallowing about half the lake as they were attempting to do that. And for us kids, it was our first swim of the year. And when we went swimming in Spirit Lake at the base of Mount St. Helens, we were swimming in the cold snow runoff from the mountain. So it was frozen waters. We were like icicles out there. And a warm day in May in Washington State, it was like 70 degrees and a little breezy. So you'd go and dip in that water that was just frigid, and then come out and have that breeze hit you and only be about 70 degrees and just shiver like crazy until you got back in the water again. And that's the way that you stop the shivering. But that was our Memorial Day. And it'll always be a special memory doing those family get-togethers at the lake. You know, my dad was a soldier in World War II. He was a sergeant in the United States Army, and he was involved in the Battle of the Bulge. He was involved in freeing one of the concentration camps there. He was positioned in the outskirts of Berlin, waiting for the orders to go in and invade Berlin. And then he stayed in Germany for a while after the war as we tried to rebuild that economy in Europe. But Dad never talked about. He shared a lot of war stories. We used to love when Dad would kind of stroll down memory lane and he'd share his war stories. But he never talked about the men in his unit that didn't make it home. I don't know whether that was an issue of pain for him or what, but he just never wanted to talk about the men who lost their lives fighting for our country and out to save each other in the unit as well. You know, so in all of these wars combined that we've had as a nation, after the after the Revolutionary War, and we officially became a country since the Revolutionary War, we've had 646,596 American troops who died in battle since then, and an additional 539,000 who died from other non-combat related causes, which may have been disease, may have been accidents, could be any number of other causes to those deaths. But let's start where it all started, in the American Revolution. The Revolutionary War had the Continental Army, our national army, was the highest troop level that it had, the highest strength level, was about 48,000 men serving at any one time. During the duration of that war, a total of about 230,000 fought in the war on our side. Out of those people who served and fought, the combat deaths amounted to about 6,800 people losing their lives in combat. Now that number of soldiers fighting also included, of course, colonial militias who served up another 145,000 men to fight on behalf of the colonies. Now that 6,800 deaths in combat was kind of dwarfed by the number of Americans that were killed by disease. You were far more likely to die from dysentery or malaria or smallpox or something like that than you were from a combat wound. 17,000 people died from disease during the Revolutionary War. In the War of 1812, they called it Mr. Madison's War, President Madison. It was fought by 35,000 American soldiers. That was our peak. And then another 458,000 militiamen that came from all around the United States. Not all of them were called in to fight, by the way. But about 15,000 Americans died as a result of the War of 1812. But here's the surprising number. Of that 15,000 who died as a result of that war, only 2,260 of them were combat deaths. The remaining deaths were caused, once again, by accidents, disease, and so on. We fought the Mexican-American War then in 1846, and this is how we expanded to get Texas, California, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, parts of Colorado, all were part of what the United States got out of that war. Just over 78,000 troops were fighting against 82,000 Mexicans. About 1,733 U.S. troops killed in combat. Now, when you consider the number of men who were fighting total, that was about 2.5% of all of the soldiers would die in war. But that number is nothing until you look at the number killed from disease and other causes, because non-combat related deaths killed 11,550 American troops. Then came the Civil War. This was the numbers from the Civil War are so staggering that total number of Americans killed in the Civil War is estimated at about 650,000. There were 2.2 million Union combatants, and the Confederates had another 1 million combatants or so. 3.26 million total soldiers, all born on American soil, or all at least living on American soil. The likelihood of fighting and dying in combat there was like 6.5%, the largest death rate in the U.S. military history was in the Civil War. over 50,000 of those deaths just to fight over a small piece of land in a little town called Gettysburg. Huge, huge price paid for that bit of real estate. In World War I, the death rate once again was very high. 4.73 million men made it into uniform for World War I. It was Americans mobilizing like they had never done before. About 2.5% of the men who entered into the military during World War I did not make it back home again. 53,402 fell to the enemy, and another 63,114 died of other causes in World War I. World War II saw 16 million Americans putting on a uniform, and it completely reshaped our society. My dad was one of those. He went into the military the moment he was eligible by age to be able to do so. Certain parts of that war were more costly for lives. For example, the D-Day invasion in Normandy, the loss of life there was absolutely horrible. But men were willing to sacrifice. In the Korean War, about 1.7 million served there. 36,574 died fighting in the Korean War. More died as a result of other causes, and the total number of deaths in the Korean theater was 54,246. The Vietnam War, there's nothing more chilling than to go and stand and watch as people look for names on the Vietnam Memorial Wall. On that wall, there are 58,000 names. 58,220 American troops died during the course of the Vietnam War. About a little bit less than 2% of the troops that went over there to serve died in combat. Gulf War, we sent 694,550 fighting troops to the Gulf in 1990 and 1991. Of those, 383 were killed. Iraq and Afghanistan, death rate was higher there. 5,364 died in action. Another 1,476 died from other causes in the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. But every single one of those that we've mentioned, over 1 million in total in the history of this country, every single one of them gave their life because of a sense of obligation, of duty. And they made a sacrifice that you and I benefit from today. That at any point in world history, we could have been fallen to peril. But men and women willing to take that on, to stand in the gap. That's what's made the difference. It's part of what I love about this country is that willingness to sacrifice on people's behalf. I have always loved America. What a just absolutely incredible country this is to live in. We may not always agree with what our government does, but we have the right to be able to stand up and point it out when our government's not doing right. And that right is protected by the blood of those patriots who have died in those conflicts all around this world. Love this nation. We've got about 6 weeks between now and 4th of July, and during the six weeks, we're going to be doing some stuff here with the City County Observer and the This Week in Evansville podcast. And one of those things is we're going to give you an opportunity to win a copy of a book that I wrote called The Great American Flag. This is the story of the giant flag that was made here in Evansville. You might recall it, 1980. At Anchor Industries. They took on the task of sewing together the world's largest and heaviest flag. When it was all done, it was 450 feet long, a football field and a half in length, and weighed 7 tons. 10,000 people went to the Evansville airport to see it on its first rollout to be displayed before the man who had the flag made, Lynn Silverfine, took the flag with him to attempt to get it displayed on the Verrazano Narrows Bridge in New York. He never accomplished that. He wound up giving the flag to the United States government instead. This book tells the story and even tells you where the flag's at today. It's still in the same place. This book was written a few years ago, but the flag has not moved since this was written, unfortunately. And so the whole story is laid out there, plus some other stories of some larger-than-life patriots, as I like to refer to them. So you can get a free copy by subscribing to the podcast. All right? So make sure that you subscribe. New subscribers will be qualified for that. Also, subscribe to the City County Observer online because not only could you wind up with a copy of the book, but you could also wind up with a fabulous dinner for 2 at Kavanaugh Steakhouse. Oh, my gosh. It is so good. So get yourself an opportunity for an incredible meal when you subscribe to the City County Observer and to the This Week in Evansville podcast. We appreciate you going online and doing that. And we will be happy to reward several lucky winners with prizes for doing that, and because we appreciate you taking the time to read the publication, the CCO, and to listen to this podcast this week in Evansville. We've got some great episodes coming up. Of course, we're going to talk more about the turmoil that is taking place within the Republican Party. It is a mess locally, and we're going to talk more about that in the days to come. Also coming up really soon, we're going to be taking you on a walking tour. EREP released their plans for the riverfront for Evansville, Mount Vernon, and Newburgh. Well, we're going to take you along the Evansville riverfront in a walk along to show you where these different elements of that master plan are going to go, and give you a sneak preview of what to expect when and if, I guess, this master plan gets completed. It's a 30-year plan, and it's going to cost us somewhere in the neighborhood of, we think, around $600 million. We'll work on securing more details on that for you in the near future as well. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining us. If you are in a family that has had a family member that has sacrificed their life in service to this country, we thank you. We salute you. God bless you. And join us again. I think tomorrow we'll have a new episode up of This Week in Evansville.